So a little bit about why we're doing this tonight. I don't know about you guys, but I got a lathe, and I immediately wanted to max it out. And then I immediately wanted to figure out how to max it out even more, and so on and so forth. So I found myself reaching for odd pieces of wood. You know, you can get a beautiful piece of quarter sawn whatever, and you can turn a platter out of it, no problem. Get a piece of quarter sawn whatever that's 4 foot across, that's a different story. So you wind up going and finding slabs like this that are going to, well, first of all, they're going to produce some really cool stuff if they're solid enough. These are all mesquite. Mesquite is incredibly solid, but this is my criteria for deciding exactly the shape that it's going to be. Yep. So this would be one shape, because we don't want to stick that on the lathe, right? This would be another one. So when you're getting into doing like big wall hangings, odd shaped platters, end grain, you're dealing with some odd shapes. Things that are going to, obviously I'm not putting this on that lathe, I think that we'd all die. But these are some things that are sculptural wall hangings in progress. But if you guys want to check any of it out, the way that you cut end grain matters. That's the big takeaway tonight. If you guys want to check, it hasn't been sanded, it's just been cut and scraped. It's also incredibly heavy. This is another one. Please don't judge my lacquer job. My shop is super dusty. I promise I'll polish it up one day. So you wind up picking up pieces that, stuff like this, that nobody in their right mind would stick on the lathe because it's going to explode. Mesquite, I find, is actually pretty stable as long as you don't have any major defective cracks in it. So we're going to go between this and this tonight just to highlight some of the cutting. When you're cutting into, sorry, I'm doing that thing where I'm all over the place, you don't have to follow me. So when you're cutting into a standard piece of side grain, you're doing face work, you're cutting in certain directions. You're making grain supported cuts. With face grain, most of your grain supported cuts are working in the opposite direction, which can be really challenging, especially when you consider you've got something large, oddly shaped. One of the interesting challenges with larger pieces of end grain stuff is that the harmonic vibration is incredibly predictable, but it is almost constant. If you think about the way the tree would be moving, if it was standing up, it would sway this way and that way. As this thing is spinning, it will ripple all the way through. So you do have to take that into consideration. Let me find that. Because I'm with it, you guys know me. So we're going to start with basic and try and reinforce this, and then we're going to move on to something a little bit less basic. It's all still basic, it's just cuts.
What chuck is that?
This is a Vic Mark 120. I'm not super bougie when it comes to spending money on things for turning. I do like good steel, and I really do like Vic Mark chucks. I strongly recommend that if you like keeping your money in your pocket, you never try a Vic Mark chuck. They're just well made, and they will ruin you. Anyway, so when you're starting off with your standard spindle blank, which these are still standard spindle blanks, right? They're just oddly shaped and they're big, and you're doing face work on them. So you're starting off with your standard spindle blank, and I think I set this to low speed, but we'll be able to manage. First thing you want to do is make it round, right? The way that we make it round is by peeling the side grain. Right, so the basic premise is, this tool is great for peeling side grain. If you want to make an efficient cut, you want to peel side grain and you want to slice end grain. Tom, you're with me, you just did that end grain bowl, right? if I were to take, let's say this odd 50 something maybe degrees bowl gouge, and try and do the same job, I'm going to have a much harder time of it. Sorry, I got something sticky on it. It happens. So, I'm not going to take this and expect to make the same cut that I just made, right? So what's going to happen? It's going to start getting real grabby on me. I'm certainly not going this way. So what you wind up doing is using your spindle roughing gouge, which everybody usually keeps somewhere roughly around 40 degrees, right? Give or take 35, 40, 50, whatever works for you. It's really good at peeling side grain. Does absolutely no good for slicing end grain. Sorry, I can't take my skew to this grinder because, I'll just destroy it. Enter your skew, which is amazing at making V cuts and slicing through end grain. I don't know if this thing will go high. It will. Little too high. We don't need to be comical and ridiculous, right? So, I'm going to smooth this off real quick, and we're going to look at a couple of V-cuts. And then we're going to look at rounding off the face and how we actually do that. So your skew is really good at making a V-cut, right? Slices through the end grain cleanly, and it doesn't pay any mind to the side grain. Which is all well and good, until we have to deal with this. You can't take your skew to this, right? I mean, you could if you're brave, but it's not going to be the most effective way to do it. I'm going to switch over to, typically, you're going to be using your spindle gouge, right? If you want to round the face or the front of this off, you're typically going to use your spindle gouge. You might use your bowl gouge. I use a 40-40 bowl gouge, so some of these cuts might look a little bit different than the way you guys would do them, but the gist of it is the same. You should smell my shop. So, when we're coming across and we're rounding this over, which is what we're going to be doing to the bottom of a platter, I'm not coming in here and trying to round it off like it's a ball, right? Because I'm going to have a really terrible time. Things are going to go flying off the lathe. I'm going to be really embarrassed in front of everybody. Probably going to be banned for life. That kind of thing. So, because we're cutting downhill, that's how we're going to get the profile that we want on the bottom of a platter, if we're turning an end grain. It's something to consider because I see people oftentimes pick up any old chunk of wood and they get excited, and I'm going to show you exactly what happens. It's going to be a disaster. Use this one. This is a piece of burl. It's not necessarily end grain, but when you are cutting mixed grain, treat it like it's end grain. You're going to have a much better time every single time. So I'm going to show you how bad this gets real quick, and then we'll clean it up. then move on to the right way to do it. You can't make a good clean cut if you don't have a grain supported cut. It's that simple. So let's see, oftentimes, is you got your 55-degree bowl gouge that you use for everything, right? Does your spindle work, it makes your Christmas stockings, brings your kids presents at Easter.
Aaron, what type of wood is that you're working?
This particular thing is mystery burl.
Mystery burl.
Mystery burl. Whatever it is, it's hard as smoke and tough as a coffin nail.
Okay.
Real quick before I turn it. When you are centering things up and putting them on your chuck, it's always a good idea to use your tailstock to drive it home. Make sure that you've got all the pressure dead center. I don't need to twist this a lot. It's the right size tenon or the right size mortise. It's holding. If I crank this thing over, especially with a piece of end grain or a piece of burl, it's going to wind up splitting on me while I'm turning it. So what people tend to do, and I hope nobody ever does again, with one of these, is they come at it like it's a standard, piece of side grain. They come in here and they do this number. Your gouge can't stay in the cut, and Perry, if you can get a camera angle there and kind of zoom in on that, the amount of tear out is unreal because you're not slicing the end grain. What you wind up doing is scraping everything. And all it does is lift the end grain out on you. So you're left with all these voids and pockets and things like that. Versus, we look at this, it's 40 degrees, it's 40 degrees. Everybody's familiar with a 40-40 gouge, right? Give or take. Doesn't work much different than your spindle gouge when it comes to face work on end grain. Since we want to slice end grain, we can come clean across it. Get myself set up, right? Alright, so this is no different than doing a facing cut on the end of a spindle blanket you've got. I'll pass that around here in a minute so you guys can feel it. Might even rough the middle of it up with the other gouge just so you can, experience the difference.
Pull that also, can't you?
What's that?
You can pull that also.
You can if you're using a gouge that pull cuts. A 40-40 gouge does not do any pulling cuts. It is a push only. You can push or pull, and when you're hollowing, pulling really comes into play. With these, you can hollow with your spindle gouge like a champion. Sorry, thought I had them all sorted out. I always think I've got them sorted out. I never have it sorted out. You guys thought it was a good idea to listen to me. Anyway, I'll show you on this other piece of mesquite. The difference is when we pass that around. So here, one of the big things about hollowing end grain is just like making a goblet, right? Or an end grain bowl, anything of that nature. You want to start out driving dead center and then scraping your way out or cutting your way out, right? Your spindle gouge, as long as you're on center, is essentially magic when it comes to this kind of thing. Because you can drive a hole straight in. And as long as you're dead center, nothing's going to happen, but it's going to make a hole. And you just give it a little twist. nice clean cut on the inside. It's a little bit rough because it's a wing scrape with your spindle gouge. The next option, the option that I prefer, is to take the most undersized scraper on the face of the planet.
What did you just say?
I said the most undersized scraper on the face of the planet. You know, Amos did last month, and he brought that scraper out like that to to do his bowl that was that big. So I figured I'd go the opposite direction. What I will do before I do this actually is just face this off a little bit better, because we are going to go ahead and finish it. Your spindle gouge will do a nice job of facing it too. My spindle gouge, it looks like it's really steep. This is just swept back to get it out of the way. This is platform sharpened at 40 degrees. I take it to the same platform that I take my bowl gouge to, and I just sweep it. Anything under 40 degrees and your spindle gouge tends to get a little racy. You know, when you're trying to roll a bead, it just wants to run away from you. 40 degrees seems to be a good happy medium. So I'm going to face this off just a little bit. We're going to keep it relatively shallow because there's not a whole lot of it anyway. But it's the same principle. All we're doing is slicing the end grain. We're not worrying about peeling the face grain at all. We're just slicing through it. This is the same V cut that your skew does on the side of a spindle. It's just a slightly different angle. The reason I don't usually use this is because I got a whole lot more mass here, a whole lot more vibration dampening. And this thing, like I say, it's relatively thin and it's already wanting to wobble pretty bad. Let's see if we can blow it up.
Oh, good.
So this is why I opt for the 40-40 versus a 55. The 40-40 will actually slice this clean. A 55, what happens is here, my cutting edge, I don't know if you guys can see.
When you want.
Yeah, this one.
The other one.
So my cutting edge is almost vertical. It's essentially skewing its way across, right? With this one, if I want to make the same cut, my cutting edge is here. It's rounded, so what it's doing is lifting fibers out as it goes. If I want to just dig a hole in this and burrow my way out, this is the way to do it. But as far as cleaning up the face of it, it's just not the winner. Getting into actually hollowing it, scrapers, I don't know if anybody here is a scraper snob. If you are, shh, I don't want to hear it. Using a standard scraper, you want to make sure you're above center, right? Your cutting edge, or your tool handle is above center. This thing is coming down towards center, and in some cases you can even go lower and get a nice shearing angle, but you do need to have control of the scraper. And you know, if I had a scraper this far away, I wouldn't be coming down here because I'm going to lose it, right? This close, I'm not too stressed about it. Works just like your spindle gouge. You can make a hole. And because of the grain structure, we're pulling from the inside out, right? I'm going to stop this here and I'm going to pass this around so you guys can actually feel the difference between the different cuts and the different tools. And then we'll get into the next one. The back of this has not been addressed. This was a core, so it is what it is. Now we'll get into the one that we're going to blow up. A couple of different options for mounting these. I don't know how many people still use glue blocks as waste blocks, but hot melt glue is a good industrial hot melt glue gun is your best friend. I picked this piece up from Tom Brooks' estate, and it had been sitting in his shop for probably 15 years. This is the glue block that was on it. It's still holding. I did test it substantially. I put a tenon on the other side just for good measure. Depending on the species of wood, you can get away with putting a mortise into a piece of end grain, but you need to know the material you're working with pretty well. I would not do it in a piece of oak or a piece of mulberry. But like I say, the mesquite it's pretty dry as it gets and cracked as it is, and you guys can see, here can you get a good look at that. That's more cracked than anybody in their right mind should turn, in general, at least on one side. The way that I like to do these, I say that without the caveat that, if it blows up, it's only going to hit me, right? Probably. You might want to watch out, shit, I don't know. So, the way that I like to do these, because of the amount of harmonic vibration that you do encounter, is I do like to keep the tailstock up there as much as it's in my way. And rather than coming around this way and making the shape of the bottom of your bowl, you're coming in this way. It's not the greatest place in the world to be when it comes to it, right? So I usually do it left-handed because I want to be over here. And there's nothing wrong with coming in a little bit high, especially if you're going at it left-handed. I would rather have my cutting edge just a little bit too high than a little bit too low because it's real easy to lose. Now, there are some edges on this that they're not going to be pretty. I'm not too worried about it because I'm going to set them on fire once it's done. Note to self. Another thing to consider, and I know we all know this, but I don't think we talk about it nearly enough. The direction that your tool rest is facing is ultimately the direction that your tool is going to move. If I'm trying to make a straight line and my tool rest is skewed like that, I am not going to make a straight line. I don't care how good you are. Stuart Batty can't do it. Your tool rest direction is really, really important when it comes to this stuff, especially when you're dealing with things that are, like I say, split or cracked. You don't want to put a whole lot of stress on them. You just want to make a nice, clean cut. Can we get through it? Are we going to do it? Speed up a lot more, but I'm afraid. I'm really afraid for you guys. You see, the gist of it is I might actually have to knock the corners off of it, but I'm gonna give it one more go. Once you get to the soft gooey center, everything's fine. You see you get relatively clean cut. I mean, for coming in hot, can we get a better angle from that one maybe? Yeah. For coming in hot, other than the stuff that's rotten, you get a really clean cut. If you try and go at it the other way, what you're going to wind up with is a bunch of grain that is ripped out and torn out, and you're never going to be, you just can't sand out, tear out. It's just not possible. Tear out, you might be able to disguise it, but the second you go to put finish on it, that big brown spot's going to turn up, and it's going to look at you and say, and then you're going to want to throw it in the fire pit, right? So, keeping in mind the direction that you need to move to make a grain-supported cut is kind of paramount. This is just a negative rake scraper. I clean everything up with a negative rake scraper. It makes my life a lot easier. I can usually start sanding around 220 just to scuff it up and get it ready for finish. If you're using these things right. If you get a little too aggressive with them, they can shape, they can do all kinds of stuff. But if you just want to clean things up, see if we can get back around 800. And these just enter straight on. And you just want to be making these light, fluffy cuts. Every now and again, you can get really, really lucky with your negative rake scraper and clean up a lot of that rot on the outside. It's not going to happen tonight. There are a couple of things you can do. If you really do want to save that, you can always use a whole bunch of super glue. You can use a 1 pound cut of shellac and then go back when the fibers are stiffened up and try and scrape it again. Your negative rake scraper will cut it pretty clean, kind of like pretty much like a cabinet scraper. Jeff, well, you know, I'm not against taking a cabinet scraper to one of these if necessary. You know, when you've got spots like this, if you want to take a little shellac and put it on there and take your cabinet scraper with the lathe not running, it's much safer. But you can also do it with the lathe running if you beef up you make a cabinet scraper out of like an old Sawzall blade, like the big industrial ones, or an old bandsaw blade. If you beef it up, put it in a wooden sleeve, leave about that much of it sticking out, you've got a beautiful scraper. It works incredibly well on any grain. You just have to use it like this, in reverse. It doesn't sit on your tool rest. If it sits on your tool rest, it'll chatter like crazy, and you'll just, you know, probably pattern in there. As far as the shape of this goes, I'm not too worried about making a delightful OG. This is something that's going to wind up hanging on a wall. And OG really doesn't mean anything to me at that point unless I need a shadow. The shape of a platter, the shape of a wall hanging, you know, form follows function. I'm a big fan of that. If anybody doesn't agree with it, that's okay. Do it however you want to do it. But I do find if I make an OG shape and it hangs on the wall, you get a really bizarre shadow. Where was I? Let's flip this around and we'll work on the other face. face, which is arguably the uglier face. Like I say, most of this is, it's not really complicated stuff. We're not going over crazy technique. It's just a matter of making sure that you're in the right frame of mind with the right piece of wood to avoid a whole lot of headache. Because if you try to go into this thing with your bowl gouge like it's a standard piece of face grain, what you're going to wind up having is, and I'm sure that we've all been there at least once, you're going to wind up having something that you just want to throw away, or you want to try and beat up with a 36 grit gouge, and you know, spend your day working on it, and at the end of the day, it's like, was it worth it? If I can get a clean cut without having to put sandpaper in the mix, I'm a pretty happy camper. I did bring a whole lot of different things, mainly because this is my skew. If I sharpen one side, it's my negative rake scraper. This is just a flat negative rake scraper. This is a different profile skew that I can sharpen one side of and make into a negative rake scraper. They are my favorite things in the entire world for cleaning things up. I've also got a myriad of odd things. You guys want to pass that around. This is a homemade vortex tool. So you run out of spindle gouge, flip it around, you got a whole new tool. You know, once this thing is gone, I'm just going to spin it around and make another vortex tool out of it. They're fantastic for doing detail work on spindles or other. This is just a really teeny tiny bowl gouge, and I love it dearly. I really do. I think I got this from Larry Sierra. I think I've used this thing every day since I got it from him. Yeah, it has. It'll fit into this one. But oftentimes I will use a piece of rubber tubing like this, just size appropriately. If I'm doing small work, it gives you enough to grab that, and if you're doing something dicey, not so much with this, but say with scrapers, you've got enough to grab, but if you lose it, that's what's going to happen. You know, you don't wind up with complete catastrophe. Do we need to take a break? Is it that time yet? Do you guys want to take a potty break?
Sounds good.
All right, we take 10. Virginia, 5. Okay, yeah. So I'm going to have to cut it off real quick. But when you do use it at home, 90% rubbing alcohol in a spray bottle, and it just breaks the bond. Sometimes you got to wait a couple of seconds, but it'll let go. As we get into this, I'm going to cut this block off. This is a piece of side grain, so it's going to be a little bit different. But then we're going to get into the center. And like I say, you want to come, your fibers are all running this way because it's a piece of end grain. Actually, that works. You know, your fibers are all running this way because it's a piece of end grain. So we want to make a hole in the middle, and then we want to be cutting out, right? If we try and do it this way, we don't have any support from the fiber next to it, and we wind out with just tear out after tear out. And in a piece this old and dry, what it is more lift out and fly away. So you can wind up with some pretty big chunks that, I mean, if you're into doing inlays and stuff like that, you can fill them, but you know, it's not my particular brand of vodka. So, I'm just going to get rid of this waste block real quick, and then we'll decide on layout and hollowing and all that. I'm still going to leave my tailstock support up as much as possible, especially because it's an iffy piece. If it goes, I'd rather know that it's going that way and not this way. Because this is a piece of side grain, the quickest way for me to cut it is by pushing straight into it. Because it's mixed grain, it's about 80% end grain, 20% side grain. So what I'm doing, just with this block, just as a reference for everybody, is I'm pushing straight in, and all I'm doing is slicing through the end grain. The side grain will peel off as the wing catches it.
Aaron, what kind of block wood would you prefer to put on?
Honestly, anything relatively like tight grained. I wouldn't use a piece of oak or anything that's diffuse porous. Anything, maple's good. Dense is good. You know, depending on what you're turning, sometimes you want something that's incredibly dense, you know, to back it up. But really, I mean, this is probably a piece of maple. Cherry works. I know not everybody wants to turn cherry into a glue block, but you know, if you've got it, you know, you can like I say, you can always spray it with alcohol, take the glue block back, and you turn it into something else. I'm not known for being incredibly judicious with my use of wood, you know, because it grows on trees, it's there, we can get more of it. I'm usually tripping over a piece of it on my way to get the piece that I'm after, so, you know. And at the end of the day, you can pick up all your little pieces, put them in a pile, and figure out what you want to turn them into. So again, we're up around 900 now, and I just want to get this thing out of the way. What this will do, you know, I mentioned that it doesn't do any pulling cuts. It doesn't do any pulling cuts, but it does a really good job of scraping if you need to level something out. Scraping with something like this on a piece of end grain is not something I would recommend, but it is doable. But you're gonna have a lot of tear out to fix. Make sure we are.
What speed are you trying to keep it?
About as close to 1,000 as I can get it. In general, under 1,000 RPM is not going to be enough to do severe damage to me if it comes off. I'm also not standing here waiting for it to happen. In general, this is not a hard and fast rule, because depending on the density or you know how the weight is distributed, 700 RPM it comes off. It might not go airborne, but it might fall down and then roll into your shin. Any number of things can happen. There's a lot of forces that are acting. But in general, especially between centers under 1,000 RPM, it's unlikely that it's going to come at your face. When you're dealing with cracks, voids, things like that, speed is your friend as much as you can get it, right up until it's not. But you know, I find the difference between how far you can go and how far you can't go is it's minuscule. So.
That's strictly on end grain.
Well, no. If you're turning between centers, if you're turning spindle blank, typically just between centers.
Yeah.
If you add the chuck, different physical forces are in play. If it comes out, it's going to whack. It's going to knock. It could go anywhere. If this thing comes off the tenon, odds are it's going to go that way. It could come at me. I'm not entirely worried about it because most of the force should dissipate before it whacks me in the face shield. The other thing to consider with pieces like this is high-speed bark. If you are standing here and you get really complacent and a piece of this bark comes off and hits you in the face shield, you're going to have to go change your pants. It's going to happen. So like I say, I want to be moving as fast as I can safely. Given the size of it, if it was even, if it was a circle, we'd probably be going around 1,600 right now. But because it's so oddly shaped, we're going to stick around 800. Like I say, all this does is just slices through the end grain and gets it out of the way. Then I have this lovely little scrape feature here that'll get all that glue out of my way. This is why I prefer to push straight in, right?
So why didn't you go straight in right there?
just to highlight the difference.
Oh, okay.
So now I've got the bulk of that out of my way. I'm gonna lower my tool rest just a little bit. I'm not taking the bowl on this thing much bigger than this tenon was, because if I get into this crack too much, it is gonna come open. I mean, there's just no two ways about it. But before we do that, any kind of decorative anything that we want to do, now is the time to think about it since we've got this thing face off, right? I like to measure in metric. It makes a whole lot more sense. If you guys like converting, that's cool. Jay, I'm talking to you. So the question you have to ask yourself here is, because it's such an odd shape, is do you want to lay things out to what would be round, or do you want to lay them out to the edge of the piece, right? So here we're looking at about 15. Here we're looking at about 15. So I'm going to lay it out to the edge, and we're just going to have empty space. I'm a big fan of negative space. It's awesome. What else can I say about that? If you guys enjoy doing things like actually calculating layouts, what's it called? Omni calculator. If you want to lay out a golden ratio, if you want to lay out a fib, Omni calculator is right there. You can also build your own golden ratio calipers if you're into that, but because I do so many odd little details all the time, I like having this handy. So this breaks it up into 5.7 and 9.2.
If you would just trim some of those long wings off, it would all be the same. You wouldn't have that problem.
I like the problem. I like my problems, and I like having them.
That's why he gets along with us so well.
So if we split it up, you know, golden ratio wise, 9.2 and 5.7.
Omni calculator, is that just a calculator app?
Yeah, it has a calculator for everything. Everything anything that you could possibly want to calculate. If you want to figure out how many nanometers in slides it would take to create the mass of an entire woolly mammoth, and my son and I have done it, you can do it on Omni calculator.
Omni calculator?
Yeah. So because of the size of this thing, I'm going to keep it small. My 5.7 is right here. I'm probably just going to put a detail there. And then we're going to come and look at, my 9.7 puts me, or 9.2 puts me right around here. So I'm just going to put these two details in. I don't know if you guys can see that blue pencil. I really like the blue pencils because they show up really well.
Barely.
Now, what are you doing with those two measurements?
Those are going to be places
What
where,
are they, what are they?
they're going to be places where I put details.
I understand that. Where do you get the place?
Oh, that's what Omni calculator, it's the golden ratio, like the Fibonacci ratio.
What's that?
This is not an athlete.
It's the golden mean. It's like the way things are naturally, harmonically, typically, artistically. Every harmonic frequency that you've ever heard will eventually fall into the same ratio, into the same spiral. If you look at any artwork that's ever been made, it all falls into place. It's as easy as 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21. So have you ever seen the spiral that looks like that? That's the golden spiral. That's the golden ratio. It's a little bit to explain right at the moment, but I can shoot you some information on it.
Okay.
I like to use these cheap little pieces of steel that you get for 6 of them for $12 on Amazon, because you can grind them into any shape you want, anytime you want, and you never have to feel bad about it. Sometimes I will use a handle. Oftentimes I won't, because again, if I lose this right here, it's going to do this, and that's going to be the end of it. If I've got a handle attached to it, it might do some more damage. Because it is a thin piece of steel, I do keep it close, because with a rule of thumb is don't be any further off your tool rest than your tool is wide, right? Not a hard and fast rule, but it probably should be, if I'm being honest. So I like to use negative rake scrapers going in to create the basic shape. Then I'll refine it with gouges, then I'll go back and negative rake scrape everything clean. So if I want to say, I'm going to have a bead here and a bead here. The reason I like to use negative rake scrapers is because they're not going to fight back. If I'm trying to take a standard scraper through this kind of thing, I'm asking for trouble. Negative rake scraper is nice and easy on you. Again, this thing is pointy on one side and it's round on the other. The other thing, that thing that I passed around earlier, that little vortex tool. Where did I put the other one? There we go. These things are fantastic at creating small details. They work kind of like a spear point tool
I was gonna say, Ken has.
for rolling beads, things like that, but they also slice like a scoop.
Aaron,
Yeah.
Catch.
That's where it went.
I was gonna say.
Thanks, buddy. So, I don't know if you guys can get a good look at that. You've seen the one that passed around. It's essentially a fluteless spindle gouge. There's nothing to catch, there's nothing to get in the way. It rolls in, it skews, it cuts, it does a nice job of doing it cleanly. You can use a spindle gouge or a bowl gouge to do this, but again, with all the cracks and all the defects, I think it's more trouble than it's worth. Especially when I can just use this to skew in. And then at the very end, if I need to clean it up, I can just give it a little. And it works just like my negative rake scraper does. You see it just rolls right over and skews down. The only hard part with them is remembering to line your bevel up with where you're going, because you do have to swing kind of wide to get there. But realistically, it's another negative rake scraper. It just makes life a little bit easier to have stuff like this handy, rather than try and do that with a spindle gouge. Speaking of, there we go. Remember my little bowl gouge that I love so well? I'm going to kind of burn through this last little bit because, you know, I don't want anybody passing out on me. Does anybody have any questions up to this point? I mean, it's all pretty cut and dry, right? Yes, no? Okay. All right, so again, making these cuts, I can't go about it like I would with a normal bowl gouge or with you know, face grain. I need to be cutting to a point where I'm slicing the end grain. So what I usually do is create a downhill slope. That way I've got a grain supported cut. And that balances that crack over and over and over again. But as long as you are holding your tool down and not pushing it in, you're not going to be fighting too hard. This is one of those things, about 2 pounds of pressure is all that it takes. If you're pushing harder than that, you're working too hard. We all want to be doing this until we're lifetime members, right? This is where all the negative rake scraping starts to happen. Before I get into dishing the bowl out, I'm going to clean this profile up. It's real quick, it's real light. As long as you're getting those fluffy shavings, you're getting a good cut, you're not going to be dealing with a lot of tear out. I will say that different steels will yield different levels of satisfaction when it comes to a negative rake scraper. The V10 steel holds its edge a lot longer. The M42 does a pretty good job. This is standard high-speed steel. It'll last maybe 10 to 15 seconds, whereas I might get 90 seconds out of this if I'm being light with it. But negative rake scraping, you're going back and forth to your grinder or to your sharpening card often. I am going to see if I can clean this outside edge up just a little bit, then we're going to dish it out and be done with it. You have to move a lot slower when you've got the air here. It takes longer to get the cut clean. I doubt that it's going to be very clean, but I'd like it to be as clean as possible. Yeah, the rotten stuff is rotten stuff. There's nothing we can do about it. But it's less sanding that I've got to do after the fact. As far as dishing this thing out, I'm going to go back to it with the scraper and the spindle gouge. You can do it with your bowl gouge if you want to pull. I'm looking right at, this is my entire life, every day in my shop, this is what I do. I have places where everything goes, and then I look at them and I can't see any of them. They all look like this. There we go. Let me sharpen this real quick. Don't tell anybody somebody sharpened during a demo. I don't want them to think I'm bougie. Bruce, I know. All right, so yeah, so again, as long as you are dead center, your spindle gouge will just push right through. If you really want to get fancy, you can back hollow, but I wouldn't recommend it on a piece like this. And again, we're starting from the bottom and working our way out because it is end grain. Once you got a hole established and a depth that you're happy with, which I'm not going too deep because I don't want to be here all night, this is where I switch over to just scraping it clean and then come back and finish it up with the negative rake scraper. closer we get to that crack, the worse that vibration is going to get. If it gets to the point where it feels a little unsafe, I'm going to stop. Like I say, it doesn't take much pressure to do this. All I'm doing is holding it and letting the wood come to me. Because any other way that you try to hollow end grain is miserable and forever taking, and it makes you not want to do it. I don't know about you guys. Anybody ever hollow end grain for the first time without being told how to hollow end grain? You get about that deep into it, and 35 minutes later, you're just ready to throw it out the window. Like I say, I'm not going very deep with this because, again, it's not one of those things that should be trusted. I'm going to switch to this, and we'll just clean it up a little bit. And the way that I finish these things, a lot of them, especially on the edges when they're just in bad shape, is with a blowtorch. And then I go back and hit them with acrylic paint or Gilder's paste or something like that, something to make it intentional, you know. Again, so now that we're back to a negative rake scraper, we want to be at center, not above. Above center with your negative rake scraper, and you're not getting a cut. And again, with these, you can get pretty aggressive. But what you're after are those fluffy shavings. This one's M42 steel, it's time to sharpen it again. That's about as long as it lasts. Whereas the V10, and Dick, this is the one you were asking about, the shape of it. What this will let me do is kind of get everywhere I need to go. And as long as I'm not digging the point in anywhere, I get that nice clean cut dead center, and it doesn't usually leave the divot. And again, these are made with the intention of taking light multiple passes. And once you start feeling that vibration, you guys can hear it bouncing back and forth, right? You're gonna lose the cut. You're gonna have, excuse me. Anytime you've got a vibration, you're getting a bounce, you're getting a spot where you're not getting a clean cut. And in this one, you can see it right here. It's, what, this? Yeah, this is V10. This is Doug Thompson. So the way I usually combat this is counterintuitive. Like I said, speed's your friend right up until it's not, right? At a certain point, it becomes about tool control and only tool control. So if I know I'm going to get that bounce and it's going to create that harmonic, and every time I come across it, I'm going to lose the cut, I'm going to slow the cut down, and it might take me a few minutes to get it clean, but I will get a clean cut out of it. Because all I'm doing is cutting that odd spot that was bouncing. It can, but again, it's all just the way you control the tool. I like these without handles often just because it's easy. It's easy to deal with, and you know, anything up to that big, an unhandled negative rake scraper is fine. I mean, if you're going that deep into something, get a handle on it. You know, put a 36-inch handle on it and hold on tight, right? But for something shallow like this, these work just fine. And then, who's on safety patrol? I remembered it. So, at this point, all I'm going to do is come in and take the nasty stuff and you'd be amazed at how long you can hold a blowtorch to this stuff without doing too much damage. Plus, now it smells like a grill. It's mesquite. But the harder you burn it, the deeper you burn it, the more pronounced the effect is when you brush it out. So I'm a big fan of doing like dry brushing, just a lot of a little with acrylic paint, gold, gilder's paste, whatever. Oftentimes you'll want to do this kind of thing outside, for obvious reasons. But it's usually hot enough that as long as nothing's on fire, you can hit it with water everywhere. It'll smoke, it'll steam, it'll be done. And for, what are these, like $3, $4 out there, Nylox wheel. You can use, different wheels will get you different effects too. The little wheels that go in your Dremel, the little steel ones, do a really fun job of like pulling out lots of details, but Nylox, it's also pretty good for cleaning up all the bark inclusions and things like that. But what you wind up left with is a visible and physical texture that you can then highlight. Like I say, sometimes you wind up burning them for 5-10 minutes and hosing them down and letting them sit overnight before you mess with them. Sometimes you can just kind of get right into it. I don't know if you guys can pick that up, but where it pulls the softer parts of the grain out where it's burnt, you can get a really, really interesting texture with any kind of highlight, if you guys want to check it out. So that's pretty much what I got for you. Like I say, it was basically just going over the important stuff as far as working with end grain as face grain. The blowtorch is just because I can't help myself. I just want to set stuff on fire sometimes. Yeah, actually, that one over there, you don't have to follow me, Terry, I promise. So it gets a pretty cool effect even if you just hit it with shellac, but I like if you hit it unevenly or hit it with different glosses. But it works really well with dry brush painting too if you hit it with blue tends to work with every wood color in demand. Some colors are a little bit more difficult to make work with the reds and the oranges. They can be really finicky to mix with those. The upside is it's paint, so you can just paint right over. And you can experiment with all kinds of different stuff. Like the copper gilder's paste, you mix with mineral spirit, wipe that over it and let it soak in the grain, and then come back and wipe the top of it off. So you've got not there's anything wrong with a utility platter. But, I mean, you can eat your cornflakes out of that other one too, if you want to. So it's just these little things that you can do to kind of make it pop. One more thing I wanted to show you guys is this. Everybody familiar? The homemade drive center, you know, that uses the faceplate that comes with the lathe. And this came with a 24-inch lathe. This is the faceplate. What am I going to do with that?
Run a couple screws to
Grind them off. You've got a drive center that you can take a platter and push it up to, and it's not doing anymore. You try and do it on the drive center that comes with the lathe, you're going to have this harmonic oscillation that it's really rough. So little 3 screws. Yeah, 3 screws is enough. I mean, you can put 12 in there if you wanted to, but you know, I kind of opt with like 3 levels, right? Every way you shake it. So. Any questions, comments, gripes, nuggets, complaints?
What do you finish this with?
It's just water lacquer.
Okay. On top of something like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as long as whatever you put on it, paint-wise, as long as it's compatible with your overall finish, it's fine. Lacquer works pretty well. Acrylic, if the min-wax polyacrylic, or if you're using, I use Liquid paints. Liquid makes a fixative specifically for their latex paint. They work great. I do, sometimes, I do. Oftentimes I'm going for a more like, subtle effect, but the milk thing is cool, you can do a lot with it. I mean, even one like that, if I just wanted to paint the beads on the back of the milk tank, it would just become a whole different thing, right? So, sorry, I just realized that I took my knock off and my microphone. Can you hear me now? All right, well, if nobody has any questions, like that wraps it up for me. So I hope it was useful.